So all that said, the real long-winded explanation of discovery, freedom, and challenge in a kind of interaction of those qualities. What's that have to do with Pokemon? And I think with Pokemon, there was a lot of discovery, especially in the original games. There was the missing number, there was Mew, there was Mewtwo, there was all these things that were not on the game path, not on the path of the original game. Which it was. I mean, Pokemon was, for the main game, was the king of railroading. You had one path through, like it was literally gated off. You can't go here because your Pokemon doesn't know cut. Even though you could step across this tree because it's a small tree, it's a sapling. You can't go this way because sapling. Or there's a rock that you just probably can't scurry over because you don't know Rock Smash yet. Or you can't swim at all, so you have to wait till one of your Pokemon. So it gated you through that. You literally had to play the game in the order it wanted you to. Right? But there were these things to discover on the side. There were these things to discover after you would go back. I think that was a big part of Pokemon, was that it would leave you these like little cookies where the main path was blocked by the rock that you had to learn Rock Smash to clear. But as you were going, you also saw other rocks that were blocking off passages that you had to learn Rock Smash to clear. And most of them didn't have anything of substance behind them. But some of them did. Some of them opened up gates that led to rare areas that had rare Pokemon. And so part of the game and part of the fun was going back and discovering these places. Looking at something that you had done already with a new light, because now you have access to things. I keep going back to the Soulsborne games, and again, because they're made very well. From Software deserves a lot of credit for what they've done. In Bloodborne, this was done very directly through the concept of insight, wherein as this stat increased, the game world physically changed. Maybe not physically, because there actually were some interactions where what was invisible would interact with you and kill you, but you didn't know why. But at the very least, the game would visibly change. And so this is a very direct interaction, as you progress, you could go back and look at places you had already been, and they are now different because of your progression. This is discovery. You could say, well, it's non-linearity. It's not linear, but it is. The game's still point A to point B. There's multiple paths between point A and point B, but you're still moving in one general direction, which is forward. But games that offer you discovery, which say, go back and find things that you didn't find before. Go places you hadn't been before. Those are almost always inherently good games because there's a sense of wonder. And I think that's the real important term here, is wonder. These games, they tickle a part of you that's very childlike. And I think the reason the games industry is getting lambasted as much as it has recently is because a lot of us are looking for that. We're looking for that tickle of wonder. And I really didn't expect this to, I didn't expect to have this revelation that really discovery is more important than freedom or difficulty. And while you do need to have those two, I really would say discovery is a lot of it. And Bethesda's a very good, and I guess it's not everything though. That's to be said. So you look at Fallout 4. Fallout 4 said it's the worst Fallout game before Fallout 76 came out, which was so bad to be not actually a Fallout game if you asked a lot of people. And I'm one of those. I don't think Fallout 76 is a Fallout game. I think it's a game with named Fallout, and that's about it. But Bethesda was always known for having these big, diverse worlds. And one of the big things that Fallout 4 did right was the discovery. The world was diverse. It was interesting. There was lots of little hidey holes and little offshoots. And, the main story, like, of Fallout 4, you could just breeze right through it, right? Skyrim's the same way. Shit, even Oblivion and Morrowind were the same way. But it was all the extra shit that you didn't need to go find that you could find that made the games interesting. And so imagine Fallout 4 without the discovery. That'd be the shit-assest game you've ever played. And that's to be said, is that the challenge of Fallout 4 was actually quite good. I think the challenge of overcoming different enemies via different weapons and the actual gunplay, that's one of the things that Fallout 4 gets lauded for, is the gunplay was very, very, very good. It felt good to shoot enemies. The guns felt interesting and impactful and different. And while there was kind of just a generality to it, you wanted a shotgun, a long-range gun, a close-range gun, a rocket launcher, there was different methods of getting there, and you'd find different weapons as you go, and the crafting would help improve the weapons and modify them in certain ways. So the challenge of the game was, kill all the things between you and point B. There was the freedom there, but not a lot, because the freedom of because I guess, so this is the problem. So I guess getting into freedom as a gameplay element. And I guess there was some, but there wasn't enough. And that's why I enjoyed Fallout 4, because I didn't play Fallout 3 or New Vegas. I was too busy playing Morrowind when those games came out. And I think I tried to play Fallout 3 at one point, and I was like, this is like Morrowind, but worse. Because it wasn't a fantasy game, and I didn't like that. And I probably should go back and try to play Fallout 3, because I probably would really enjoy it. But I think one of the things that that separates Fallout 4 from Fallout 3 is that, so there's freedom, and there's freedom, so I guess there's freedom and exploration, but that's more the discovery aspect. In the actual story of the game, there isn't a lot of freedom, because, you've got 1 of 4 dialogue choices, and they're not actually choices, they're just different methods of getting to the same spot. Especially with the story quest, you don't really get a choice. You can't tell this person to go fuck themselves, I'm not doing it. You have to do the game, right? Where in Fallout 3, it was designed more branchingly, so that you actually could drastically change the way the game unfolded based on the decisions you made. And again, this plays into the discovery aspect of the game. So I think that's really how you define it, is that you have to have freedom with discovery. Or you have to have no discovery at all. And I think that's kind of the catch there, is because, so you look at Minecraft, there's nothing to discover in Minecraft at all. Minecraft is very, it's very flat in that aspect. It's all presented in front of you. If you play creative mode, literally, here's everything. Pick what you want. But then but that's also sandbox versus non-sandbox. And again, this is, I think the whole point of all of this is that it's not quite a clear cut of an argument of what's good and what's not. But there are definitely elements that can be measured to a degree. So what makes Fallout 4 worse than Fallout 3? Wasn't the Discovery? Discovery is probably better almost. Because I think Discovery is one of those things that that Discovery improves with age, being in the way that it improves with visuals. It's one of the aspects of the game that is impacted the better the game looks. Because if the graphics are shite, and I think that's also a measurement of the times as well, because I remember Morrowind looking awesome when I was a kid, and now I look at it and I'm like, this is the worst. But I think as we're getting older and as things are progressing, we're expecting more out of games, so it improves with the quality of graphics. Because it's about, again, that wonder. And you don't get filled with wonder if the game looks like a potato. But discovery and freedom, so what's the relationship between those 2 points? And I think freedom, I kind of said it before, freedom is directly related to the direct challenge of the game. Freedom relates more to how you overcome the challenge, where discovery is more of an aside to that. So in Fallout, what's the challenge? Find your son. And usually, and I guess that's kind of the important part, is I started to define the challenge in Fallout 4 as kill everything between you and point B. Which, that is part of it. That's part of the challenge, but the real challenge is find your son, because it's a story-driven game. So the point of the game is to complete the story. So in that story-driven game, it was find your son, complete the storylines. And so they're actually, and again, I started to say that there was a good amount of challenge in that game, but that was in the sense of that was the discovery. And I'm sorry, that's where I'm mixing things up. Is that All the shit that exists between you and completing the story, that's discovery. So again, Fallout 4 is discovery, very good. The challenge of the discovery is kill all the super mutants, or ghouls, or raiders, or what have you. The challenge of the story is simply getting to the story. And in that aspect of the story, the game sucks because there is no challenge to the story. It's literally you're railroaded directly through. You can't say, nah, fuck Sean, I don't feel like finding him anymore, and then the game takes a different turn. You can't deny the game the story, and then the game changes around you. There's literally no choice. And, a good game will give you the feeling of choice, and that the challenge of, complete the story has different options you can take, but will eventually get you back to the same path. And Fallout 4 doesn't do that at all. There's no branching story, there's no twists, there's no turns. It's very direct and very straightforward. So the main part of the game, the actual game itself, is not very fun. But what is a lot of fun in Fallout 4 is discovery. And this is, again, an example of where discovery can really hold the game. Skyrim was the same way. I think Skyrim had a better main story, mostly because Skyrim didn't present itself as conceptually having choices. You weren't presented as, with these, big dialogue portions and, pseudo cutscenes that made it seem as if you had a choice in anything. Skyrim is like, you're the hero, go defeat evil. Cool. That was how Skyrim was presented. So the challenge in Skyrim was defeat evil. And again, there was a bit of freedom in that. And again, part of Skyrim was it started to fall flat in the story mode because this became more mechanically because the combat was a little and the magic was definitely a little and then the shouts, some of them were fun, but towards the end you had to use the one that caused the dragons to come to the ground because you weren't going to fucking kill Alduin any other way. So it became a little but then in Skyrim, the discovery was amazing. All the side shit was amazing. And the side shit in the discovery plays into the story because the discovery in a game like Skyrim and in a game like Fallout, I think more so in Skyrim than in Fallout, they become methods by which you gain more stuff to make the story easier. So it makes the goal of the game, completing the story, easier, and that actually adds to the freedom. So discovery leads to freedom, and that's a good way to handle it, I think. And that's why Skyrim was, despite what anybody wants to try to say about Skyrim, it's, objectively a good game because it balances challenge, freedom, and discovery very well. Again, there's basically no I guess, again, it's a different type of challenge than in Fallout 4, because Fallout 4 presents itself as the challenge being how to, of this dialogue and this developing story that you feel like you have a part of, which you don't. Skyrim doesn't give you that. Skyrim says, go kill the big dragon. Cool. Again, Fallout 4 gives you more this idea that there's a story developing, but there's not. And that's kind of the disingenuousness of Fallout 4, and I think why it's received a little bit harsher criticism than Skyrim, and why it doesn't continue to be ported the way Skyrim is on fucking everything to the point of being a meme, because Skyrim is just good. Fallout 4 is not bad. I would say Fallout 4 is good. And so, yeah, it's that balance of freedom. It's that balance of freedom, challenge, and discovery. And if you can balance all those right, so again, tying this all back to Pokemon. Pokemon's challenge was very simple, but not too simple. Its freedom was, again, simple, but not too simple. You couldn't get away with too much. Again, you didn't have that much freedom. But there were also 151 Pokemon in the original game to choose from. So that's a fair amount of freedom, considering that the majority of them were available at points through the game to be found and discovered. And how you actually got there was up to you. So yeah, but I think the big thing for Pokemon and why it's remembered so fondly was the discovery aspect of it. Because what it did was it reinvigorated the game world as you played it. Same thing with the Souls games. That discovery drives the game. The game becomes better because of it. Same with Path of Exile, a game that's another objectively good game. It's objectively good because there's the discovery of the different interactions of the different skills. And so the discovery really does seem to be kind of this defining core feature that really does seem to make or break a game, because even, again, so let's go even simpler. Let's go to Mario and kind of those early generation games, those platforming side-scrolling games. Mario even had discovery. Remember, you would take the right warp tube and you would, suddenly you're in a whole new world, right? And you found a new zone. And that was, I think, what made Mario good, because I think one of the big aspects of discovery is also replayability. Games with good discovery, you can run through, play the story, but then you can go back through, start over, and you get a whole different experience, depending on how you play it. But then there also has to be kind of diversion of the discovery aspect, and so this is one thing I think Skyrim got wrong. Skyrim doesn't present you with any conflicting choices. You can do everything always. And so what happens is, if you can do everything there is to do in one playthrough of Skyrim. There's no choices to be made. And so all the content's available. Which I believe Morrowind was like that as well, but I think Morrowind had more content. So it became to the point where it was somewhat unfeasible to do all the content at once. But with Skyrim, there was just enough that you could do it all in one playthrough, and maybe that was a conscious choice. Maybe not. But I think that kind of lack thereof wealth of content combined with the freedom meant you could do it all in one sitting. So, could you replay Skyrim and find some shit you never found before? Absolutely. Depending on the kind of person you are, would you? I don't know. But there was still enough in there that even that first playthrough, it took a very straightforward, simple, borderline boring story of man becomes powerful, powerful man defeats evil dragon, and adds so much more to it, and it brings the world alive. And again, it's that discovery aspect coupled with a good balance of challenge and freedom that really kind of defines good games. And then, so to kind of wrap this up, look at a game that's currently in a bad state, which would be Battle for Azeroth, World of Warcraft. There is no challenge, so the game is boring. But there also is I guess there's a little bit of freedom, which I think is why, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of freedom in World of Warcraft. There's a lot of things to do, just none of it matters because there's no challenge. But that, again, lack of challenge with lots of freedom is appealing to a large number of people. The problem is none of those people are what we would call gamers, because gamers want the challenge. It's about the challenge, because the challenge provides you with a journey, and then the journey leads you to discovery. It leads you to explore your world and see what's out there. And I think that's what World of Warcraft lacks right now, and why it's objectively a bad game at the moment. Because there's no challenge, there's lots of freedom, but then there's no reason to discover. Nobody goes out and tries to, but then there also is nothing to discover, which that's also kind of an aside to the game being such a large MMO. How do you have a secret? It's going to get found, it's going to get plastered everywhere, but there are still some, and they do it, and it was a big thing. There was a mount that came out, I think it was like a year ago, Riddler's Mindworm, I think it was. That was like this, only way to get it was you had to do a big complicated list of shit in the right order, and then you got this very special mount. And it was received wonderfully because it was discovery. It took this game that hasn't had anything to discover for so long and brought it back. And I think, just to kind of finally wrap all this up and repeat myself a bit, if you look at older iterations of WoW, Classic and Burning Crusade, there was more to discover. Partially because Classic, compared to all the expansions, was much larger. There was so many different zones, so many different things to find, so many different places to go, that just, it maybe wasn't discovery in the strictest sense. It wasn't, it wasn't that this stuff was hidden. It just wasn't immediately accessible. And one of the kind of defining moments for me early in my playing of World of Warcraft that really kind of made me really realize the scope of this game and how it was at the time, especially, was I remember there was a flight path that took you from, I don't remember, somewhere, it took you from, I think it was Ironforge to Stormwind. And part of that flight path, I think, takes you over the Burning Steppe. And at low level, all of a sudden you go from forests and, so you're going from Ironforge to Stormwind, you're going from snowy mountains, blah, 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 a little bit of ocean. Holy shit, giant area covered in fire. All the mobs were skull leveled out, elites, everything looked cool and crazy and badass. And I remember going, I want to go here. I want to find out what the fuck this place is about. I want to find out how you get here. And that was, again, there wasn't discovering in the sense that it was hidden, but it was discovering in the sense that it was something that was just inaccessible at the moment. And I think current WoW doesn't have that. And by the nature of it being an MMO, I think it's impacted even more so by not having that.